Hi, here we are at PulumiUP. We're here to talk about platform engineering. My name is Komal Ali. I'm a software engineering manager at Pulumi. I'm a manager of the cloud platform engineering team, where we build tools for platform engineers. And I'm going to hand off to the rest of the panel to introduce themselves. Kief, do you want to take it away?
Sure, thanks, Kamal. I'm Kief Morris. I work for ThoughtWorks, where I'm the global head of our infrastructure and cloud community of practice. So basically, I work with client platform teams around the world and kind of get to have experience of what different people are doing and working on. So happy to be here with this panel. Thanks.
Awesome. Jess, do you want to go next?
Hey, I'm Jess Mink. I'm the director of platform engineering at Honeycomb. So that means I run the teams that both help internal teams be successful directly through deeper software systems that they can build on top of, as well as the teams that do enablement for the other internal teams. And Honeycomb is an observability company, which means helping you understand what your software is actually doing in production so you can sleep while your users are happy. So also get to explore the platform engineering from the product side.
Awesome. Lindsay, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Lindsay Jack. I'm the VP of Engineering for the platform division at Snyk. And for those that don't know Snyk, we're a company that provides security for people as they code and to try and stop security problems pushing into the new code that they're developing. And so my job is to support the teams building the products, and our teams work closely with our own AppSec teams to try and figure out how to try and live what we're telling our customers to do.
Awesome. Thanks, Lindsay. And last but not least, Nariman.
Thank you very much. So I'm Nariman. I live in the Netherlands and I work for a very big in European standards corporation as a software security architect at the moment. But I'm coming from a development background myself. I've been developing for the last 20 years. I did backend, frontend, I did DevOps for many years, cloud development. I did DevSecOps, and last couple of years I specialized on application security programs, maturity programs, BSIM, OWASP, SAM, and threat modeling. Those are my favorite topics today. So I'm looking forward to chat with you and see how you see platform engineering and DevSecOps collaboration, what challenges are. I will bring you that vision as a security engineer, as application security engineer to the table.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Let's start off with an easy one, maybe. Platform engineering means different things to different companies. What are some of the common traits and roles you've seen on the platform teams that you've worked with? Let's start with Lindsay.
Okay. So I find this quite interesting because we deal with a lot of companies who are integrating our products into the CI and CD systems. And as you deal with a spectrum of companies from small through to some of the largest organizations in the world, you see very, very different approaches around this. And I think we're seeing some trends of very decentralized, some trends where it is much more a command and control style thing, depending on where the organization is, compliance regimes that they have to conform with, and so on. But I think what we're seeing increasingly is a mapping where people are building out more and more self-service mechanisms, trying to abstract things away to allow the developers to focus on developing the applications as opposed to some of the lower level infrastructural things. But I think we're seeing sort of different organizations, maybe they have an SRE team or they have a DevOps function. It's sometimes in different parts of the world operating slightly differently as well. And elements of that are moving towards platform engineering. Snyk itself is going through aspects of that where we're trying to figure out what's the right way to come to the table within our own organization to let the devs move at the speed that we want them to move at, rather than trying to perhaps give them too much freedom, as we've done before, and that's made some challenges for us. So I think it's very much an evolving landscape, and it's really interesting to watch if you like, where different organizations are and trying to meet them where they are and figure out how you can be helpful in those scenarios.
That's so true. I'm curious, does anyone have a response to Lindsay? Have they gone through similar situations?
Yeah, because the definition of platform engineering in my mind is to help the rest of the company run smoother and faster and also unlock things people didn't know were possible. And when you think about that mission and you take a step back, we tend to focus on tools and software, but it's really a people, process, tools thing where people means skills and culture. So if you take that all together, platform's really responsible for a whole socio-technical support across the organization. And so you really do have to meet an organization where it's at and think about evolving it and moving it forward along all these axes. Because the most common pitfall for platform orgs, besides being glorified ops orgs, is building a bunch of tools no one wants because you didn't actually meet people where they're at and you only focused on the tools leg of that triangle.
It's very true. Kief or Nariman, anything to add there?
Maybe I can comment on that. So finding problems is easy, but motivating people to like work on them, fix them, is rather difficult. As an application security engineer, when I was putting together our DevSecOps pipeline and tools, I took ownership of some tools and tried to collect feedbacks from developers and give it back to the providers, the company that provided this tooling. And it didn't go very smooth. It was very slow adoption, slow improvement. But by the time when at some point I was a bit busy with other things, and I told our developers, look, guys, can you take the ownership of this whole process of this whatever tool, SaaS, SCA, or whatever provider we had? Can you take the ownership? And I don't have time for this now. I'm moving to a different role. And when they start to own it, somehow we start to roll and work. And I realized there's lots of this culture aspect, behavior science behind it, and lots of big corporates don't look there much yet. They don't look at how I would motivate people to actually use these tools and use it right, and how you will motivate those people to come together to the platform team or DevOps, DevSecOps team and ask for help, ask for improvements of tools and support. So if those requests come from them, they will gonna use it for sure more rather than DevSecOps people deliver something and here use it. I'm really against of policies or like top-down approach that here to do, this is a policy, you need to do it. I'm always looking how I can deliver the value, the message to the people, the end users, that they want themselves to do it. So I don't have to worry about it and babysit anybody. And that is a very interesting area I'm learning this year myself since a year, and where I think we need to learn a lot about behavior science and motivation topics, soft skills.
I hear that. I've definitely experienced that myself as a person on a platform engineering team creating tools for other engineers. That relationship between teams is so important. And we're all trying to work towards something together, but you have to bring everyone along on the ride. What about how have you seen platform teams evolve over the last 2 or 3 years? Do you feel like there are new trends that are arising today that weren't quite there a few years ago? Have things changed direction substantially? I'll let y'all choose who goes first on this one.
Yeah, I might pitch in. So I think drawing on what folks were saying on the for the previous question, I think there's a real trend of thinking about how to get users kind of engaged with using the platform, how to avoid that build it and they will come mentality, which leads to build it and nobody uses it. And so I think one of the trends that you see is that kind of product thinking. Like it's like looking at like, what do we learn from how to make software products and services and so on, that users will, and how do we take that same mentality and some of the same techniques? So things like doing user personas, what are different types of users within our organization who might need things, and what do they need from the platforms, and research and talking to them. And it ought to be easier to do inside an organization because you have much better access to them, right? You don't have to kind of go out and commission surveys or go to a shopping mall and set up a table and ask people questions or whatever you might do, right? You can, they're in your organization, but yet we're kind of lagging on this. And I think also in the same vein, it's around trying to make smaller pieces and get things into people's hands more quickly. So try things out, get them using it rather than building the whole thing, which is, certainly a few years ago, that was, I think, the default attitude a lot of people had was, we'll build the platform and wait, when we're done, here it is. And so figuring out how to do those kind of small drips of small pieces and small. And so I think some of the things that are available now for technologies to build platform are a lot more around composability of platform pieces, rather than being a PaaS, again, where you buy a product and here it is. It's, well, how can we make different pieces and then swap them in and out as we learn more and evolve them as we go?
Yeah. I really like talking to developers and teams about it as pain-based development, right? Like I think there's different phases you go through as a platform org or as an org in this space, right? You start as an ops team that's like doing the stuff, and then you hand off some of the ownership and you start looking at like what's right in front of you. And that's a really great moment to be pain focused and prioritize based on the current pains in the organization. And when you're in that phase, you really want to do tight feedback loops, right? Because people are feeling active pain right now. Put something in front of them. Does it solve their pain? What can you do today to make your coworker's life better? They want to work with you. And you know you're being successful at this stage because you get back pressure on your roadmap. People are adding things and putting in requests faster than your team can do it because they believe in you and they believe in the impact you can have. And then once you address those like burning pains, then you have a chance to step back and start to look forward and say like, what's coming? What are the challenges that are coming ahead of time? What are the things we can generalize? How can we get ahead of stuff? And that's kind of the evolution I see of teams in this in this space, or organizations in this space.
That's interesting. I think one of the things we've seen happen in Snyk is it started off very much as a you build it, you run it type engineering organization. And in order to try and support that and enable it, tools were built to enable people to do a whole bunch of stuff. And as the organization has grown, some of those things were then going, well, actually, should this be more of a platform engineering function? And how do you bring some of that back? Or how do you decide where we put the interfaces that allows people to be productive, but still allows the platform engineering areas to make change at the rate that supports it? And I think one of the things that certainly we've seen there is the risk of getting caught up in the long tail and focusing on a whole bunch of edge cases where you're not bringing the benefit to the broader part of the organization. And the comment that Kief made about thinking about it as a product, I think is very important there in terms of trying to make sure that we're thoughtful about the steps that we're going through to enable the largest parts of the organization, and also where the expertise is in the organization. I think we found some parts of the org, it's fine, leave them where they are just now because they know what they're doing. Let's not get in the way of that. But there are other areas where maturity levels or the ability to operate certain things are at different positions, and like how can we help them is perhaps the more appropriate answer there.
Anything to add there, Nariman?
What I see as evolvement is, at least our side, we start to adopt more and more standard solutions, technologies, rather than in the past we would try to automate and script and do stuff ourselves in-house. Big corporates are more and more open to ready solutions. That I see as evolvement. But also as a naming, so maybe just to compare with the DevOps and platform engineering, that in our organization, the DevOps team was always about optimizing the time and efforts of developers and also operations. But the team's title was always DevOps. But now thinking about it back years and years, I've been working the same code for 12 years. We have been always doing platform engineering. We used to call it deployment and tooling, but our focus was always how can we improve the productivity of development teams and the whole cycle. And for me, I see it evolves a lot of evolvement last couple of years, and most of that evolvements were towards moving really standard tools, solutions. That's the biggest change I see right now.
That kind of leads pretty well into the next question that I have, which is more around kind of the relationship between DevOps and platform engineering. How do you all see that relationship? Do you feel like they complement each other? Is is a DevOps workflow required for a highly operating platform engineering team? I'll let Kief start on this one.
Okay, I was going to say, I think part of the challenge with that is defining what we mean by DevOps, right? Because it means different things to different people. To some people, it's like, what's the people who run our Jenkins server, right? The DevOps team, and in some sense, I think DevOps as a role, as a thing, has kind of evolved into to platform teams, maybe just taking a broader view of it. I mean, to me, DevOps has always just meant getting people to collaborate more on the end-to-end process of getting kind of value into users' hands, right? And that's it, right? That's the thing, and so that manifests in all kinds of ways. And I think platform engineering, especially when you get into the stuff as we've been talking about, as Nariman was just talking about, around essentially developer experience. So how can you help developers be more productive? And so to me, it's a at least a complementary thing, if not the same thing, or DevOps is an umbrella. Different ways to look at it.
Does anyone have an opposing view? Do you feel like we're kind of in the same boat, DevOps and platform engineering, or are they is there a differentiation here?
I think it's a matter of degrees, right? Like if you think about sysadmin to DevOps, if you think about DevOps to platform engineering, there's not necessarily always bright lines. And I think a lot of the things we used to do as DevOps are now built into our cloud providers as basic tools. And so we don't have to think about them as much. And the tools that we do have left, the Legos we're playing with, are more powerful. And so that allows us to get out of the weeds a little bit more and enables different things. But are we still writing Terraform sometimes? Absolutely, right? So it's a matter of degrees, and that enables a different mindset. There's not necessarily a bright line between the two in my mind.
It's interesting. You brought up two things there that when I was thinking about this question, the sort of the analogy to Lego blocks, I think is quite good. And I sort of see a continuum, a spectrum from one end to the other in terms of different organizations, or what they call platform engineering sometimes sits in a different place on that spectrum. But also I think depending on where the organization is and the capabilities within the broader engineering organization, one of the things we've seen is finding people with the skill set to do certain types of more operationally focused things. We may not find that in some teams, and so it's like, is this where platform engineering can abstract some of that away, or at least focus on best practice so that they have less need for getting their head into that rather than do their job? And so that will vary based on the sophistication of the teams.
And I like what you called out there, Lindsay, because one thing we're doing with our platform engineering team is we actually have a front-end tooling team that's like doing the design system and helping with the abstracts on the front-end development. We think of platform a lot as coming from that DevOps lineage, but if you really generalize it out to giving better abstractions to teams and better Legos, you can think of it more broadly and apply it to other domains as well.
Yeah.
That's a super interesting angle to look at it as. In this world, you're considering this front-end tooling team as part of the greater platform engineering team?
Yeah, they're a team that makes all the other teams go faster and be able to do their work more effectively and be able to operate at a higher level of abstraction. And that's the job of platform engineering.
That's a really cool take. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted someone.
No, I was going to say, to make a rather tenuous analogy, you're building a Lego set, but you still have the pieces available should you have someone else who needs to go build something different.
And I think an interesting way of thinking about platforms is less about a single platform and then people building stuff on top of it. But especially as you get kind of a bit larger and you have more people working on different things, like data analysis maybe, and monitoring observability and other kind of things, is, well, how can they share across? Like, how can they provide services to each other? So it becomes kind of omnidirectional or networked or whatever. And so the platform should really be about, I think the Lego analogy, obviously a favorite one, right? Because it's like, well, you have a standard of here's how you click pieces together. And so as long as you make your pieces in this kind of shape with these kind of bumps and these kind of things in the bottom, then, you can click them together. And so I think a lot of what, going back to what are the trends in platform, a lot of that and what we're seeing in some of the kind of platform tools and things coming out is they're providing ways of plugging other things together rather than providing solutions to all those things.
I think I'm going to adopt this view of platform engineering at Pulumi. I really like that the design system and components are part of platform engineering. Love that. I feel so in my experience, there's been kind of, you're at an early stage startup, everyone's doing DevOps, everyone's owning their own things. And then you get to this inflection point where a platform team becomes more important. Everyone has kind of spread out and done their own thing. And then we start getting worried and we're like, okay, we need to pare this back. What are some best practices? Well, I guess two questions. What is there a magic number of that inflection point? And then what are some best practices for making that transition from everyone doing their own thing to this centralized platform team?
I mean, I'm not afraid to talk. So I don't think there's a magic number. I think, like all things in platform engineering, you need to pay attention to the pain, right? When is it becoming a problem? That's when you invest in things, especially as a startup, because you don't have a lot of extra resources to play with. In terms of best practices, for automating anything, and we're kind of talking about automating things here, it's good to do things manually first and then build a run book, right? Turn that run book into documentation and then start thinking about what parts you want to automate. So for platform eng orgs, when you're starting to standardize things, when there's chaos or like variation across your company, I would start by talking to people, finding out where their pain is, finding out where the variation is, and then come out with a document like, hey, there's 5 different ways we're deploying to prod. Here's the one we think is going to be the best. This is the one we're going to support in the long run. You don't have to do this one yet, but like this is where the wind is blowing. If you're just trying to decide, here's an easy answer, right? You can start really gentle and you don't actually even have to start with any code. And then you can work from there to start providing more and more automation and make more of that paved path, right? Because if you make the right thing easy and you're making people's lives better and you're listening to them and you have that tight feedback loop, people are going to come with you, right? So that's how I would start.
It's kind of, how do you get people to get on the bus with you? And particularly in an organization, like one of the things I find interesting is as you work your way across the organization, you find all these kind of bright spots of good things. And then it's like, well, can I use that to get the team that did that thing to buy in and come with us on the journey and help push some of those things more broadly? But does that fit into the picture of where we're trying to go? And the pain, absolutely. But what the other interesting thing I think we've seen is very often you have tens or hundreds of variations of that pain. And then like, can you get people to acknowledge that actually it's kind of the same thing? And if we just squint a little bit and look at it in a different direction, and then sometimes that eases the ability for them to come on board. Or why are they special? Because that's another common thing that we see is that there's a specific issue that they feel is very important to them, and understanding, is that actually a real thing, or is it something I need to acknowledge to get them to come on board with us?
Yeah, getting buy-in on the problem before getting buy-in on the solution is super important. Otherwise, you can talk past each other in the solution space so easily.
Yeah, that's where I think that the pain is an excellent handle for it, right? And so asking people, and listening to people and what pains they're talking about is often the key. And I think when an organization is growing, when it is that small company that's becoming bigger, I think often what you find is then people, the form of the pain takes is people are spending time on things that they really don't want to be spending time on. So it's like, okay, we've started growing, we're getting a lot of customers. Every time we get a new customer, I've got to go and do these tasks. And it's like, I'd really like to not have to do these tasks every single time. And so that's where you can start to kind of look, okay, probably address that by, maybe again, having a platform team or something like that, look at it.
I would like to maybe add something here, but also I'm curious what you think about it, because it just came on my mind a bit. As you say that as organizations grow, you mentioned there can be problems with flexibilities. How companies manage to stay lean and flexible? And internal mobility, you said it's very important, right? When a company grows a lot. Because as we make product, we can realize that we keep repeating certain actions and certain things redoing, and we see, oh, perhaps we can make some script here or some automation, and or make a framework, design system, whatever, for that product. And it can happen that at a certain moment you get a lot of those type of requests, and you feel like, all right, we need to have a platform engineering team to take care of this type of request. And perhaps you need people who understand some web technology to write some certain frameworks. And then a year later, maybe you have a bit less products launching, or others are being more and more stable, or you'll launch a product in totally different technology domain, maybe AI, some new mobile app. And now request towards the platform engineering team is less or different compared to their capabilities and skills. Maybe it doesn't fit exactly, but it's a big corporate, right? So you already got your FTEs, so your team created, you have a team lead, you have 5, 6 platform engineers, but do you really use them efficiently? Because according to me, the request of such let's say optimization and tooling, it's a dynamic. It can change in organization. And being lean, yeah, it means that the person sees a problem, oh, I can fix that, and maybe start to address that. It's very important. Internal mobility is very important. In big corporates, we are trying to solve this problem, how we make sure that people, when they see they don't fit here, but they fit there, that they request internal mobility, they move away, and that platform engineering team perhaps adapts its skills and the capacity accordingly. That would be amazing if it happens well, because the question was what are the best practices. I wonder how you would do that. So in a big corporate, are your companies lean enough or flexible enough to adapt to the request and inflow of work for platform engineering teams, or is it fixed team that always is used very efficiently? Is it like that for you? Oh,
I find that large companies often are, sometimes they can go too far in trying to have a kind of one size fits all, and so I think there's a need to understand the diversity of requirements and things going on, and maybe saying that, okay, maybe it's not a single platform team or even a single platform team around a particular problem area, like say compute or whatever, but like maybe we need to look at how to align so that we can have different levels of sharing. So maybe you can have sharing between, have a couple of different teams providing compute services, say, to different groups of teams within the company. And maybe those teams should be definitely in a loop and trying to share as much as they can, but without trying to cram everything into one box.
I think a scenario that we've seen happen quite a bit is in the larger organizations when they do M&A or merger type things, and suddenly you're bringing technology stacks together where existing applications run. What do you do now as a platform engineering team? What are the choices you make around where am I going to lean in? Where do I need to support the things that they already have? And possibly this is where the security aspect comes in more. What things in the larger organization am I having to make sure I protect as part of that journey? And is that where we start, or is it somewhere else? And there's a whole load of nuance in that, and it's interesting as well. Like in a relatively established organization, the norms are there, but you're bringing a new organization into that culture. Are you back to a new set of pains or a new set of challenges that you've got to work through there? And how do you build the bridges on how to approach that? Because there may be competing stacks on the platform engineering side that you've got to figure out what you do with that.
I think I draw from what Jess said earlier around, like, automation isn't necessarily the only solution, right? You have different levels of solutions. So the first thing is, like, security is a perfect example. You define your standards and your policies and so on, and that's a level of platform, right? Okay, it's documented and understood, and you provide support to different teams into how to do that in their environment. And then you can kind of start layering up things. Okay, maybe we can provide some, like, okay, we have a centralized service or tool that teams can integrate with and use for some things. And then, so I think there become those layers, and that's where there are some things where, like, okay, everybody might end up on the same platform because it's a really generic thing. Like, I don't know, cloud hosting kind of thing is a very low level. That can be quite generic, but there may be some things, but there are always going to be some teams which have particular needs which aren't going to be addressed by a common solution. So having the ability to kind of go between those, and especially where you're onboarding acquired companies or where you're trying to kind of pull together, hey, look, when the economy was booming, we had 5 different digital teams in our organization, which all went and built their own, I don't know, Kubernetes clusters or whatever. And so then you want to have kind of a more gradual on-ramp to say, okay, here's how we can kind of consolidate step by step, maybe it's API level and so on, and then, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely to everything you all have said. I think the other thing to call out is just like the tools we work with keep going up stack. I think our platform orgs can go up stack, right? Like one of the teams in the platform org I work with looks for services that more than one team have created a version of and then generalizes them and then offers that, right? So it's an internal piece of software. It's not necessarily a vendor. It's like actually part of the product, but it's a generalized thing that's not directly visible to customers that provides another level of abstraction to people inside the company to work on top of. So I think if you broaden your definition of what platform is to any abstractions that are going to help your developers move smoother, right, and faster, it's hard to run out of work if your org is continuing to grow and continuing to take on new challenges. And yeah, you might have skill mismatches, right, that you have to deal with, but that's going to be the case in any organization as your charter changes, as the problems that you're addressing change a little bit.
That makes a lot of sense. I guess a few of you brought up security challenges as part of platform engineering in this last question. In my experience, when you're solving people's pain in that like platform engineering journey, it's easier to bring people along. I feel I have hit challenges where the security journey evolves for a company and you are now adding process to a developer's workflow that is necessary, but can feel challenging for the teams that are used to moving fast, leaving their IAM roles kind of open permissions, and now you got to lock it all down. What are some key challenges that you've experienced in your DevSecOps journey? Nariman, you want to take this one away?
Yes. So for 2 years, well, let's say since 2016, my specialization is to measure maturity of AppSec program, identify gaps, make small plans. And I have been doing this for the company I work for, but also for other small companies, helping them to improve. And what I see is the problem is what drives exactly adoption of sec part of the DevOps tools, right? All the SCA, SaaS tools, DAS tools, whatever. The drivers, sometimes people adopt them without really understanding what it brings, without explaining to developers what they will gain, why they need to use it. Very often what I see in some companies, small companies, they get pressure from market. Their sale questionnaires say, do you have a SCA tool? Do you have SaaS tool? Do you do DAS scanning? And they say, yeah, well, it looks like I have to do it. And I'm not talking about the company where I work, because I'm part of this OWASP SAM community, and we talk a lot on all kinds of OWASP events, hearing from other people, doing assessments outside. We don't really deliver the message, that we don't explain to people why we're doing this. So the sales driver is one. Then you have also regulatory drivers. They have policy, European Cyber Resilience Act. These days in the US, you have this new act since last year when you have to disclose your SBOM, software bill of materials. So you have to do your SCA work. And again, the management asset, they say, here's a policy, we need to do it. But then developers start to receive emails. They see hundreds of issues, and there's no motivation to fix them. So you just see the growing list of problems, of tickets. How do we motivate them to actually look into that? Or what are your policies? How do you need to sit with them perhaps and discuss, are we going to fix all? Are we going to fix the critical? What is our strategy? Why we are doing this? I would love to see that the drivers are understanding of the risk and caring for a customer, wanting the best for a customer, that they're not under risk, that they're not compromised. But the reality is not there yet. And that's the challenge I see. I see the challenge that I don't have enough time to work on this emotional part of the business developers, or like on this psychological part of it, and explaining very well, understand very well, instead of running after adopting tools, because there is a lots of media attention driven by tool providers. Sometimes from legislation, sometimes through the sales, because customers want that. So that's the challenge I see at the moment, to be honest. And I wonder what others think about it.
I see parallels there, and I mean, I've had roles in the past where, as we tried to introduce security tooling into the pipelines, the dev team rebelled because they couldn't do anything. And it's sort of like, I think if we think about that from a platform engineering perspective, how do you be thoughtful to gain the benefits of the introduction of something like that, but do it in a way that it feels tractable? So it's pain, but pain in small increments. And you can sort of choose how you're introducing that to people, and use, hopefully in partnership with, you know, a security team or an AppSec team or whatever is appropriate in an organization to kind of shape the strategy of the things that you're going after. And also, how do you take burden as a platform engineering team away from the broader dev teams? What are the things with IAC or other pieces that platform engineering can do broad spectrum security changes and remove that need from the actual devs working on developing the applications, and they can concentrate on a smaller list of things. But the organizational tolerance for that varies massively depending on the market segment you're in, the compliance segment that you're in. So I don't think there's a one size fits all. It's more how and where can you integrate in a way that makes sense for that organization, and even within the organization, meeting different teams in different places can be challenging.
Anything to add there, Jess or Kief?
Yeah, I'm coming at it from a slightly different place because security is under a different director at Honeycomb. So I'm coming at it from a customer perspective. And what I really notice is you all are probably familiar with the 4 tendencies, and about half the people you work with probably really need to know why to be able to engage with something, right? And you're just throwing a bunch of work and saying, because we said so, because the security scanner said so. So like, that might not be the right answer, right? Like if you go back to the larger business context, if you assume that everyone around you really does want to do the best thing for the customer and for the business in front of them, they're trying to trade off between solving all sorts of different pain, whether it's reliability, whether it's missing features, right? Whether it's scaling needs, whether it's these security issues, right? And so they're trying to do a really hard trade-off. So I think being really pragmatic and being really thoughtful about what and when, right? And really trying to help devs understand the need and the impact and the business impact, because people want to feel like their work matters, right? And checking a whole bunch of boxes because a robot told them so without any other context doesn't feel that way. So how can you bring it back to the impact? How can you give the right business context? And how can you help people really deeply believe that why? And then I think it changes the relationship.
An idea that just popped into my head that could be an interesting way, in some cases at least, to have that conversation with developers or to demonstrate that, is to kind of do like the test-driven development thing, where you're like, let's first have a failing test. So can you like inject a problem, right? So can you like slip some, a faux exploit into a library, right? And then see, oh no, now we've got, not released to customers obviously, but oh, something slipped in, and look, and now we have this thing which can help with that, and here's how it helps with that. And it might make it a little bit more tangible. I don't know if there's ways of playing with that kind of thing to make it more tangible for developers.
That's super interesting. Like, are you saying even, we do kind of fire drills and similar ideas, but is this kind of like a similar, like, throw in some chaos, I guess, kind of summarized to like bring people along, and it all kind of comes down to communication at the end, right? Like having everyone understand the reason why they are doing something. And for some people, that means having to experience the pain of not doing the thing to understand why it's important.
Yeah, and I think seeing, like, especially discussing the kind of the consequences, right? So, like, as people said, it's not just, oh, we need to tick the box, we need the scanner to come up and have all green or whatever. It's like, if we don't do this, here's what might happen to our users, right? Like somebody might lose money, like from their, somebody might get ripped off or whatever, or some bad things might happen to people or to your company, right? We might, something bad might happen that means that, like, we're going to end up in the newspapers in a really bad way. So yeah, and I think, yeah, so that's, I think that demonstrating and making it, like I said, tangible, cool.
A good exercise that we found is a game day around a 0 day. How organizationally would we respond? What would platform engineering need to provide the rest of the organization to support that? Is quite a painful exercise the first couple of times you go through it, but I think it brings it home to people as well, because where we are today, that's probably a 2, 3, 4 times a year event. So how do we get good at it? How do we take burden away from the teams and get the right information to them at the right time?
And the interesting part about that is that's a scheduled thing, right? A lot of stuff coming from security is unscheduled. Even so, one thing to think about is how can you reduce disruption? How can you batch things? How can you predict timing? How can you make as many things as possible scheduled, right? So it's a project and people get a sense of accomplishment versus it being something that popped up in the middle of their project that's getting in the way of things. And there's going to be a certain amount where you can't, but where can you work with the natural cadence of how people work?
I hear that.
Can I add very quickly something? You mentioned if you scare them that we can have an incident, right? If you scare people, look, if you don't do that, that can be an incident. Does it really motivate people to do action or it does, but is it long-term motivator? Like limiting availability of something, saying if you don't buy it this weekend, it will be gone, the deal will be gone. Or if you scare people, that is short-term motivators. What are the long-term motivators? Understanding the meaning, why you're doing that. If you involve people, make the problem and ask their opinion or give them some VIP information, like a consultant before rolling it out, that motivates people more. And there are more techniques for that. I think that's why I say behavioral science is like a very interesting topic to learn, at least for me going forward. What are the long-term motivators to involve people? What I did at our organization, we decided to approach every team and said, guys, girls, I want to have someone from every team who wants to learn security with me. I'm doing it for many years, but I'm learning every day. I'm going to events. It doesn't mean that you're going to do more work, but if you're curious and you want to grow the skills in 2-3 years, let's learn together. And we start to meet every month and ask people to share with each other stuff. And that after a couple of months, people start to come to me and say, oh, I tried this tool and I found these findings, and I think we can put this rule there that to reduce the false positive. And suddenly stuff start to roll out by itself. And I'm super happy, of course, because I don't have to do that much work anymore. So again, talk of challenges, we need to be very aware how we motivate, not with scaring, not with limiting, and not with a policy. It works, but it works for short term. And understanding what is long-term motivators, that is a 100 million question that once I solve, yeah, it's a big topic, and I find it very important.
I really like the way that this conversation has gone, because I often feel like we codify things to avoid having to explain things or bring people along. We're like, we can just abstract this away so that you won't have to think about it. And that is a very useful tool to have, but it is equally as important to bring people with you to be on the same page about what's important and why it's important. And that has come up kind of repetitively in this conversation, and I really appreciate that. I guess I want to talk about my favorite thing, which is metrics and data. How do you measure success in platform teams specifically? What are some of the key metrics that you are tracking? What does your dashboard look like? What are you looking at on a day-to-day basis?
I might jump in with a couple of the low-hanging fruit here. So one, I think the DORA metrics are great, and I think most of the stuff that we do in the platform level should have an impact at that level of, how effectively teams are able to deliver software. I also like to apply those within the platform itself. So how often are we making kind of updates and changes and stuff to platform things and so on? So that's one. And the other one I would say is Net Promoter Score is a good thing. Just ask your developer teams 1 to 10. Do you think this is a good platform to use? Would you recommend other people come and work here and use what we're giving you?
I like that. Jess, you want to take it next?
Yeah, so working at an observability company, we're all about data. So if you think about the different parts platform is responsible for, one part is reliability. So how do you build SLOs that really tie to customer experience, right? Because those are going to be your North Star. From a reliability perspective, and that's how you're going to be able to choose when to prioritize reliability versus new feature work across your company, right? So really building those SLOs that the whole business can get behind that are based on real customer experience are absolutely critical. And then if you look at the other aspects, you've got user experience. So you need, and this is more a thing you're providing to the other teams, right? Because you're helping to provide those feedback loops so that they can move fast, right? So what are the ways that you're providing information about user experience of the customers? And then you can think about the internal developer experience. How quickly can they debug issues? Do they have the tools they need? How's the CI/CD process? Like, what's the subjective experience and objective experience? So we actually do a quarterly survey about the subjective experience, and then we have a bunch of different key metrics we look at, especially around areas we think need improvement from the objective experience. And then we also do open-ended office hours so that we can start catching themes and think about what are we not thinking about. And those all together come together in the roadmap and help shape the priorities.
Lindsay or Nariman, anything to add there?
I work, since I focus these days on threat modeling a lot, and I did some thinking about what metrics mean for me. It's not really about DevSecOps tooling, I'm apologizing for that, but actually it is how it's related. I have a number of findings in our issue tracking system that are coming from bug bounty or from pen test, from all these post-deployment incidents, for example, all these controls post-deployment. And these days I'm promoting the threat modeling. I'm trying to monitor how the adoption is going. And what I'm trying to monitor there as a metric is that what is the ratio of security issues that are coming from this post-production kind of controls, like pen test, bug bounty, all the stuff, compared to issues we are finding during threat modeling early in the design process. Because those type of issues, they're both recorded in the same ticketing system, but the ones that we find early, we can immediately change our architecture. We can immediately take it into account in development. It's cheap, much cheaper to do it, rather than once you find it in pen test, you have to rethink whole or refactor stuff. And that's what one of metric I'm looking, and numbers show in what I saw in some reports from my colleagues in industry in a Threat Modeling Connect event in Lisbon. They showed actually 3-year these charts, and they showed this indirect relationship that if you do more in early threat modeling, really a number of findings in the end goes down. And that's what I'm trying to achieve on my side, in my organization, to demonstrate after 3 years, look, you see I was right. That one metric I'm really taking care to do that. And the second metric that I'm really taking care and pay lots of attention is whether the participants of some activities I do, like threat modeling event, workshop, find it useful, and if they recommend to their colleagues. It is not very concrete metric. It's not something you measure in tool. What is finding useful? It's very social, yes, no. If my colleagues find that activity we did together useful, and if they want to recommend it, then for me, it will have a viral effect. I don't have to go and convince everyone else. I have so many second leaders that will take over and just lead the way scaling of that change in organization. So to bring it to your example, if you're a platform engineer, for example, you go try to convince a couple of people and they find it useful. If you try to get from their mouth, do you find it useful? They say, yes, I find this activity very useful. Would you recommend to other departments to do it? If you manage to get yes out of their mouth, you're doing a very good job, because then they will be promoting your work and your initiatives further. That's what I'm looking at. And it's very soft metric, but that's what I really like to ask always. Would you recommend to other teams to do the same exercise or use the same tool if it's a tool?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, even a subjective metric it's an important feedback mechanism, right? As Jess mentioned as well, you kind of want to make sure that the things that you're doing are useful in a softer way. You know, the hard numbers are always important, but it's also important to get people's feedback. Any other key metrics here that you want to mention as important to tracking?
I think one of the ones that we use is going back to Jess's notion of pain. You know, how many requests are coming in? Are we seeing systemic things come out and actually there's something there that we need to go? Is that a documentation problem? Is that a tooling problem? On the security side, it's more what proportion of the changes are we absorbing within platform engineering so that the teams don't have to? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? But more with the platform initiatives, I think it's like, how successful are we? Aspects of our org are relatively decentralized at the minute, and like, how successful are we at pushing the change across the org? And what is our cycle time on doing that? Because the better we get at that, the faster we will be able to get the org to move. So it's not getting the platform engineering team more able to move themselves at lower friction, I think, is also a key part of what we're trying to figure out the right answer to.
And yeah, and to follow on what you were saying, Lindsay, just measuring isn't enough, right? You have to figure out what's the actions based on it. So we actually once a quarter put out 4 different reports, which is how are we doing on our key SLOs? How are we doing on our COGS? And like what's changing there and what are things to watch out for? How are we doing on call? What's the experience there? Do people have what they need? How are our incidents going? And then what's the overall subjective experience of being a developer at Honeycomb? So we actually look at all 4 of those every quarter and write summaries that go up to the exec level, right, to create that visibility and to help create that shared understanding of problems so that there's room for movement and change in the right ways.
I love that.
I think one thing that's always important to keep in mind, I think, especially with some larger organizations, is to be careful about how you use these kind of metrics and measures the purpose. So they're most valuable when you're using them, for yourself as a team, right? For your information, this is how we can improve, as opposed to as soon as it ends up on like a dashboard that goes and, and especially that affects like, what's going to happen to you as a team and compensation and all those kind of things. It's really hard then, those go awry. And I think that's known, but it's also one of those things you have to step back once in a while and kind of, remember.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining me today. I think we're just about at time. Really appreciate the time that you've taken and the discussion that we've had, and look forward to chatting more with you in the future. Thanks so much, everyone.
Cheers. Thanks.
Thanks all.